Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. A bipartisan group of US lawmakers meets Denmark and Greenland to reassure them of congressional support. The visit comes after Trump says he may use force to secure the strategic mineral-rich Arctic island. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney meets Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing to seek a trade deal. Xi says relations have improved since their November summit after years of strained ties. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado presents her Nobel Peace Prize medal to U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House. A U.S. official has confirmed that Trump will keep the medal, which he praised as a sign of mutual respect. The UN Security Council holds emergency talks as Iran accuses the U.S. of fueling unrest and Russia warns against foreign interference. Western powers threaten sanctions, Iranian dissidents warn of mass killings, and the White House says 800 executions are planned. China says it resolutely opposes a U.S.-Taiwan deal, cutting tariffs and boosting Taiwan's investment in America. Beijing urges Washington to follow the One China policy as it claims Taiwan as its own territory. South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol is sentenced to 5 years in prison for abuse of power, obstructing justice, and falsifying documents. The court says his 2024 martial law move caused a national political crisis, and he showed no remorse. Israeli forces kill at least 10 Palestinians and wound several in attacks across Gaza. The violence follows the U.S. announcement of a second phase of the ceasefire deal. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni holds a strong lead in early election results as he seeks another term in power. The party of opposition leader Bobi Wine says he's under effective house arrest. Now for this hour, we start with Russia. The Kremlin has welcomed recent calls by some European countries to resume dialogue with Russia, describing the remarks as a positive evolution of if they reflect a broader shift in Europe's strategic thinking on Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that Moscow had taken note of statements made by several European leaders in recent days suggesting renewed engagement with Russia. Moscow had an ongoing dialogue with the United States about so far unsuccessful efforts to get a peace deal in Ukraine, but no such dialogue currently existed with European governments. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much, Dr. Doctorow, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how significant is that, if this move does become in action, like EU or European countries forge or try to talk directly with Russia instead of having US in between all the time?
Well, the countries that we're talking about are, first of all, Macron in France, secondly, Meloni in Italy. And the really surprising development was yesterday's statements by Chancellor Merz in Germany that Europe has to find a new balance in relationship with Russia. And the still more amazing discovery by Merz, he admitted yesterday that Russia is a part of Europe. It's a European country. Well, this belated discovery of the facts on the ground, geographic facts and political facts, are evidence that Mr. Trump's efforts to break up the EU, to cause there to be fissures widening in the EU, are having success. The Europeans have not been invited repeatedly to the peace talks, and they have been foot draggers, and they have been working against the efforts at peace. Finally, it is clear, I think, to some of these leaders that the results are counterproductive and they are simply marginalizing Europe and leaving it with no geopolitical weight. So we see these first attempts to address the issue before them, that they establish their own direct ties to Mr. Putin and not have to beg for the intercession of Mr. Trump, is taking effect.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. What do you think led to Macron and Meloni and Merz change their mind? Do you think they realized that it's inefficient to keep talking with the U.S. or coordinating with U.S., or do you think they realize some things just get lost in translation, or maybe things that Europe wanted wasn't really reaching U.S. or Russia?
Well, I look at these three leaders, and I'd like to call out that the least reliable is, of course, Macron. He is a chameleon. He changes his positions on these issues from one day to the next. One day he's saying we have to reach out to Russia, and the next day he's speaking about sending large contingents of soldiers to Ukraine. So I don't take his words with particular importance. Meloni is also not to be relied upon. She plays both ends according to her opportunism. She pretends to be an intercessor with Donald Trump, to be a favorite of Trump, and that's highly exaggerated. What I find most significant is precisely the change in position of Chancellor Merz. He is not changeable from day to day. He moves very slowly and deliberately, and he is the least volatile of these personalities. He is the last person to say that he's going to put troops anywhere, not the first person. And so the fact that he came around yesterday and speaking about the need for a balance of relations, or recognizing that there should be any relations with the neighbor to the east, is a most remarkable change.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that. And do you think that Russia will put, or Europe will put, any pretext in a meeting if this were to be formalized? And also, do you think that since Russia, Putin has always said that these leaders particularly are very Russophobic, right? Do you think that he still thinks like that?
Well, oh yes, of course he does. The issue here, and I failed to mention this, what is prompting this re-examination of positions and an eagerness to go to Putin not through Trump but on their own, I think is this whole to-do about Trump's plans to annex Greenland, which will, if effectuated, if that takes place, will likely lead to the breakup of NATO. The breakup of NATO is not just as dissolving the legal framework of an alliance. It suggests the removal of 50,000 American troops from Europe, the closure of American bases in Europe, the decision to reverse the plans of stationing medium-range nuclear-armed missiles in Germany, which Biden had more or less imposed on Merz's predecessor, Scholz. These changes leave Europe absolutely defenseless against Russia, and they're absolutely not marginally, but no, they wouldn't last a day in an armed conflict with Russia. And I think that realization is bringing about changed thinking about with regard to contacts with Mr. Putin. I think that is really what's pushing this. It's not just they changed their minds. No, NATO faces the real possibility of dissolution, and that is focusing minds.
Right. Thank you for sharing that insight, Doctor. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on to Hungary. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has launched a national petition to gain support for his policy of rejecting EU funding for Ukraine. With the elections approaching in April, the future of Hungary has been stressed as being at stake, with the election seen as a choice between war and peace. Meanwhile, the petition will be distributed to citizens, allowing them to express opposition to funding Ukraine's war efforts against Russia. However, Orban has also claimed without evidence that the EU could pressure Hungary into sending troops. Polls have shown growing opposition among Hungarians to EU support for Ukraine. Let's listen into what the Prime Minister of Hungary has shared.
Ideje, hogy a magyar választókat erről a kérdésről megfaggassuk. Ugye Magyarország az egyetlen olyan ország, amely a stratégiailag fontos kérdésekről mindig megkérdezi az embereket. Rezsicsökkentés, migráció, gender, Ukrajna uniós tagsága. És most itt van ez is. Ez egy nemzeti petíció formájában tárjuk a közvélemény elé, mindenki meg fogja ezt kapni, és lehetőséget kap arra, hogy nemet mondjon erre, és azt mondja a kormánnyal együtt, hogy mi nem fizetünk ránk, ne számítsatok, mi nem fizetünk. Ezeket a magyar jóléti intézkedéseket nem fogjuk megváltoztatni. Ezeket a család- és otthonteremtési intézkedéseket, nyugdíjasokat védő intézkedéseinket nem fogjuk megváltoztatni. Minden európai országot bele akarnak húzni a háborúba, mert miért csak francia és angol katona menjen oda és halljon meg, mikor itt van 26 európai uniós tagállam. 27. Tehát a dolog az úgy fest, hogy az a nyomás, hogy magyar fiatalok katonaként menjenek Ukrajnába, ez nőni fog. És jogos az a félelem, hogy az ukrán párti erők, DK, Tisza, mint minden nyomásnak ennek is engedni fog. És előbb-utóbb, ha Brüsszel párti kormányban Magyarország, a fiatalok elküldik Ukrajnába. Ez egy reális veszély. És ezt mindenképpen meg kell akadályozni, ezért mi nem akarunk se magyar fiatalt, se fegyvert, se pénzt küldeni Ukrajnába, nem akarunk belebonyolódni ebbe a háborúba, és nem akarjuk engedni, hogy ez a háború beszippancson benne.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much, Doctor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how do you analyze, Hungary? Where does it stand?
Well, in the EU, it is commonplace to say that Mr. Orban is a great friend of Putin, and that therefore he is opposed to various policy positions of the EU's 29 member states. However, my understanding is that Mr. Orban is only a friend of the Hungarian nation, and not a friend particularly of anybody else, which is not surprising if you are a head of state. Unfortunately, too few of the heads of state in Europe are interested in the fate of their people who put them in power. Mr. Orban is one of them. I congratulate him on what is not only an opportunistic thing to do, which is distribute this petition, which you can otherwise call a referendum. It is an exercise in direct democracy. We use the word democracy a lot in Europe and in the world at large. But democracy that we know is representative democracy. That is through election of people who then hopefully are doing our will, although they are really under no obligation to do so. Direct democracy is typically referendum. The only country in Europe that practices this regularly is Switzerland. The rest of Europe does not. And so what he's proposing to do in a petition, which otherwise is a referendum, is precisely to demonstrate, to take the pulse of the Hungarian nation on an issue of primary importance. And I think that's a very good thing. It would be very nice if other European countries did the same and put to a vote of their people whether they should be funding Ukraine, whether they should be sending weapons to Ukraine. And I almost guarantee that the results would not be very different from what will come out of Mr. Orban's referendum petition, which will be rejection of further aid to Ukraine.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And lastly, how could Hungary's rejection of EU funding for Ukraine affect its standing with other European Union members?
Well, I don't think it will change very much, because let's remember that in
Yes.
December, when the agreement was reached on lending 90 billion euros to Ukraine under the fiction of a reparations loan, that is to say, it would be repaid out of reparations funds that Russia will never pay to Ukraine. That structure of the loan was possible ordinarily under conditions of unanimity, of 100% of the member states agreeing to it. by exception, by derogation. In fact, two countries, Slovakia and Hungary, were allowed not to participate in the debt that would be incurred to provide the 90 billion euros to Ukraine. And so today, it really is clear that Hungary has gotten away with it, that it is not participating. And I don't think that anything that Mr. Orban does or says now in this petition will change the feelings of the other 28 or 27 member states of the European Union towards Hungary.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Rowe for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Canada. In a significant move, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced that China will grant visa-free access for Canadian visitors following a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. This marks the first such meeting between the leaders in 8 years and signals a thaw in bilateral relations. Alongside the visa announcement, Carney has revealed a landmark trade deal including a reduction in tariffs on Canadian canola seeds from 84% to 15%. Additionally, Canada will allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles to enter the market with a preferential tariff of 6.1%. Let's hear from what Prime Minister Mark Carney has shared.
I'm very pleased to share that President Xi in our meeting today has committed to ensuring visa-free access for Canadians traveling to China.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Mitali Nikor. He's an economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Mr. Nicole, for joining us. Ms. Nicole, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how do you think, how will this be affecting Canadian market and also Chinese market?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Mitali Nikor, and I'm the founder of Nikor Associates, a think tank based in India. So I think what is critical here to understand is that the Canadian government has clearly realized that their biggest trading partner and neighbor, which is the US, has now adopted a foreign policy that is increasingly unpredictable. So at any stage, they can sort of come in and say, today we are blocking trade from Canada because of XYZ reason, as they have done in 2024 as well as in 2025. Particularly in 2025, we've seen blockages, we've seen tariffs, we've seen, sort of these measures being taken to block trade. And it's not only about merchandise trade, it's also about investment. At the end of the day, if the Canadian businesses and industry want to have a predictable investment environment, even that is not present in the US anymore. Therefore, engaging with the second largest economy, if the first largest becomes difficult to deal with, is a natural diversification strategy.
Do you think that they will be able, these two leaders, Xi and Carney, will be able to throw all the things that are still the sticking points between them under the rug for the sake of their economy?
So definitely, I mean, at the end of the day, why do two countries come together? It is for economic interests. It is for making sure that trade and investment can flourish. It is to ensure that their citizens can have more opportunities in either country. And the two countries have now realized that the sticking points which were coming up earlier were actually coming up because of the intervention of third or fourth parties. Today, the fact that Canada and Europe as well as Mexico are all looking towards China and are all looking towards, in fact, Brazil and India as well, it means that they have understood that they have to diversify their trade options, and putting some of these sticking points aside is critical. Of course, some of the sticking points were also in the previous Canadian administration, and the new administration has a very different dispensation on many of those points.
Thank you for highlighting that and sharing that expertise with us, Ms. Nikor, and joining us today. Thank you. Now we move the focus onto Asia. Myanmar is defending itself at the United Nations top court against accusations brought by the Gambia, which claims that Myanmar's actions against the Rohingya Rohingya violated the 1948 UN Genocide Convention. The Gambia has presented harrowing evidence of mass atrocities, including mass rape, murder, torture, arguing that these actions were part of a genocidal campaign targeting the Rohingya people. Myanmar, represented by Koko Hilang, maintains that the 2017 military crackdown, known as the Tatmadaw operations, was justified as a counter-insurgency response to deadly attacks by Rohingya insurgents. Hilang has emphasized that Myanmar had no choice but to act to protect its citizens. Judges are hearing the evidence over 3 weeks to determine whether Myanmar breached the Genocide Convention. While the ICJ's decisions are not enforceable, a ruling in a favor of the Gambia could increase international pressure on Myanmar. This case may also provide insights into future rulings on similar accusations against Israel concerning in its Gaza operations. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Doctor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you think, how will Myanmar's defense at the ICJ shape international perception of its actions against Rohingya? And how significant is this, the fact that, after so many years, this has once again come into light?
Thank you, Asubal. This is a very serious issue, and it should not be taken under the carpet, because predominantly around 6.3 lakh people, Rohingyas, are today in Myanmar, and a large number of them are being displaced, and they are staying in Cox's Bazar area of Bangladesh, and in excess of around 1 million people are there in Cox's Bazar, almost 10 lakhs, and they are staying in absolutely inhuman conditions. So now, if you look at Myanmar, the northwestern part of Myanmar is the Rakhine state. This Rakhine state, especially the areas of Magdao, Budidong and Rathedong areas, these are predominantly where these people are staying. And the historical context is that in the 1982 citizen law, Rohingyas were excluded from the list of the Myanmar's official ethnic nationalities. So they are practically stateless. They don't get any health care or any kind of citizen rights or any kind of rights. And even as you mentioned, 2017, prior to that, in 1978, the Operation Dragon King forced thousands of them into Bangladesh. Then 1991, 92, there was a military campaign which was launched against them, and which resulted in mass displacement. So this context I'm actually giving you because the projection of Myanmar in the International Court of Justice is only one-sided, because we have to see what kind of inhuman treatment Rohingyas were getting in Myanmar prior to 2017. And in 2017, the Rohingyas by then actually formed a Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. And this is what is being referred in the International Court of Justice, the ARSA, because they resisted attempts of the Myanmar military at that point of time, Tatmadaw, as you mentioned, and which resulted in mass killings, rapes, and destruction of the Rohingya villages. And almost 7 lakh Rohingyas at that point of time were displaced, and they went to Bangladesh. So in this case in the International Court of Justice, which Gambia has actually filed, there is a lot of truth, there is a lot of sanctity to this case, and the evidences which have been actually given are phenomenal, which I don't think Myanmar lawyers can even prove anything on their side. So I think this case requires a humanitarian look. The United Nations HCR is very, very clear that there are around 6.3 lakh people still residing in the northern Rakhine states, and they need justice. So I think though the International Court of Justice has really no enforcement laws to direct the Myanmar government to stop these atrocities and give them their rightful place, because Bangladesh also is constrained to accept them, because already more than 10 lakh are staying in Bangladesh without a home, without proper shelters, food, clothing, medicine. All these issues are there. And though the Arakan army is now dominating this Rakhine state, but Arakan army has really not done anything for the Rohingyas also. I must state that in spite of Arakan army being there, they have not looked after the Rohingyas' interest. They have let them be what they are. And I think concentrating such a large force of people in one area is also a security hazard, and especially for countries like India, because of the border it actually faces with India. So in
Doctor, yes.
conclusion, I would just like to actually finish this argument that this case needs a de novo look.
Thank you very much, Major General Doctor, for joining us and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to Africa, as Chinese, US, and other foreign companies compete for the Democratic Republic of Congo's strategic minerals. Communities such as Lukutwe, a village in the mining province of Haut-Katanga in the country's southeast, fear growing restrictions and incursions into protected reserves and are seeking to safeguard their land. Locals also fear that if deforestation begins, rainfall will decline, leading to food shortages due to reduced agricultural production. Let's listen into what some of the locals have shared.
Juu ya kuproteje miti, juu mvula yanze kupika, kama mnakata miti fashi yote inabakia mu desert, mvula itaanza kupika hapana. Tutaanza kwa maesheki ya kulima, vyakula vitaanza kutoka bupeshi. Kisha tena kuna kwa mambo ya kukata miti, banetufundisha juu ya kuchunga pori, juu ya buyoka abuna hako tena huku kwetu. Zamani belianza kututunza shiye mkukomea kwetu ni madawa ya miti. Sasa na ile madawa ya miti njo ile belianza kubeba aba benye banakeuza sasa ya mahospital. Belianza kukata paka miti mijiji, banaweza kutransforme benye vile banayua inakuwa ni makomprime. Sasa ile miti yote banesha kukatakata, banachoma makala.
Tomate iko natoka sana wakati ya kipoi sek, bananza kazi kutumika kule, beko nasabisha matiere mwile mutoni ya lwafi. Ile mutoni ya lwafi njo iko nashusha mai, bule buchafu bote bu unashuka. Tamo ana samaki na kufuaka kama banasabisha ile matiere na samaki iko nakufua mule mutoni. Sasa bulongo bunafanya nini? Bunaribika. Tuko narima tomate utepanda mukutosha tomate tukame na hivya. Tomate unakuwa na revenue ndani.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.